dimension and there is a justice dimension. And in the religious dimension, it is not too late for anybody to be forgiven. I mean, I'm not jumping up and down for joy that these guys are in all that trouble. I don't like their politics, but I don't like to see anybody in that kind of trouble. That is forgivable. But the justice part is a strong track as well. We have a responsibility to prosecute illegality. And just because a person says, oh, I'm more religious than you are, doesn't mean they get a free ride on that. And that's the problem I have with Senator Coburn. That why try to reduce the thing? Why try to work it out? It was an illegal situation. Let's confess it. Get on with whatever the justice judgment is, and let America be America as one that is forgiving of moral failures, but is dead set on seeing justice done.
Reverend Dr. Welton Gaddy, the president of the Interfaith Alliance. I so enjoy talking to you, and it's always great to have you here. Welton, thanks for coming in. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. Senate Armed Services Committee is taking up the question of the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy this year for the first time since the policy was formulated in 1993. You might remember that I went to the first hearing last month in D.C. Today was round 2, and opponents of repealing the policy today introduced a former Marine general to testify in favor of keeping the policy. His name is General John Sheehan. He's a retired Marine general. He's former Supreme Allied Commander of the Atlantic for NATO. Here he is speaking with Senator Roland Burris at today's hearing.
Joe, could you just give me a little insight of your background? Did you ever command black soldiers under your command?
Sir, the American military has been integrated since President Truman was a president.
1947, by executive order, sir.
I have never commanded a unit that there were not Hispanics, blacks, whites, and Orientals.
General Sheehan's argument against Don't Ask, Don't Tell was essentially today that the liberalization of the military would weaken the military. He, in fact, made a very specific argument about that today that led to this surreal breaking news tweet from the Associated Press. It reads, retired U.S. general, a former NATO commander, says Dutch army failed to stop genocide in Bosnian war because it included gay soldiers. AP. I can't tell you how stunned I was to see that when I was looking at Twitter and saw that come across today. That's what it said. That is actually also the argument that he made. And that argument did not sit very well with committee chairman Carl Levin. It led to this pretty remarkable exchange.
That led to a force that was ill-equipped to go to war. The case in point that I'm referring to is when the Dutch were required to defend Srebrenica against the Serbs. The battalion was under strength, poorly led, and the Serbs came into town, handcuffed the soldiers to the telephone poles, marched the Muslims off, and executed them. That was the largest massacre in Europe since World War II.
Did the Dutch leaders tell you it was because there were gay soldiers there?
It was a combination.
But did they tell you that? That's my question. They did.
They included that as part of the problem.
That there were gay soldiers among the Dutch.
The combination was the liberalization of the military, a net effect of basically social engineering.
You said that no special accommodation should be made for any member of the military.
Sure.
Are members who are straight, who are heterosexual, allowed in our military to say that they are straight and heterosexual? Are they allowed to say that without being discharged?
Are they allowed to declare the sexuality?
Yeah, are they allowed to say that, hey, I'm straight, I'm heterosexual? Can you say that without being discharged?
There's no prohibition to my knowledge.
Is that special accommodation to them?
I wouldn't consider a special accommodation.
Why would it be a special accommodation into someone who's gay to say, hey, I'm gay? Why do you call that special? You don't call it special for someone who's heterosexual or straight. Why do you believe that's a special accommodation to somebody who is gay?
I think the issue, Senator, that we're talking about really hasn't a lot to do with the individuals. It has to do with the very nature of combat. Combat is not about individuals, it's about units. We're talking about a group of people who declare openly sexual attraction to a particular segment of the population and insist on continuing to live in the intimate proximity with them.
But
that, by law,
you allow that for heterosexuals.
Yes.
You don't have any problem with that.
Don't have a problem with that.
You don't have a problem with men and women serving together, even though they say that they're attracted to each other.
That's correct.
That's not a special accommodation.
No.
It is kind of a head scratcher. Gaying up the military leads to massacres, and attraction between men and women serving together isn't a problem. But yeah. Anyway, there was more drama outside the Senate hearing today. Lieutenant Dan Choi, the Army National Guardsman who came out on our show last year, was arrested this afternoon after chaining himself to the White House fence. According to the Advocate news magazine, he and an Army infantryman who was discharged under DADT are reportedly being held by police overnight. Another former serviceman outed and ousted under Don't Ask, Don't Tell testified at the Senate hearing today. He is former Air Force Major Mike Almy. He told a story there that he first told on television on this show earlier this month. Major Almy served in the United States Air Force for 13 years, including a tour of duty in Iraq in 2006, where he commanded nearly 200 airmen as the insurgency was at its height. That was when the Air Force decided to use its resources to investigate Major Almy for being gay. He never told anybody he was. He was outed by someone who went through his private emails and then alerted his superiors to what they found there. Major Mike Almy now joins us once again. Major Almy, thanks very much for making time for us tonight. Appreciate having you here.
Good evening, Rachel. Pleasure to be with you again.
Let me first ask you your reaction to General Sheehan's testimony today.
I was a little stunned by particularly his story about the Dutch military and trying to link their operational readiness in Srebrenica with their allowing open gays and lesbians to serve in their military. I kind of scratched my head on that one because, as I mentioned in the hearing after the general made his statement, I was stationed in Europe. I have served right alongside with the Dutch military. I have been in the field conditions on an exercise with the Dutch, where my American unit served right beside the Dutch military, officers and enlisted, and there were absolutely no problems whatsoever. And the issue of sexual orientation or Don't Ask, Don't Tell never once came up. It just simply was not an issue between the American forces and the Dutch forces. So I was a little concerned and a little uncertain as far as what he was getting at.
So many of our NATO allies and so many troops alongside whom our troops have served in engagements over the past 8 years are militaries that do allow openly gay men and women to serve. Correct. Not just the Dutch, but the British, the Israelis, lots of other people. Do you worry that the General's comments today will essentially be casting aspersions on the military capabilities of all of those allies of ours?
I think that is a concern, and that's a standard argument that that the people that support keeping Don't Ask, Don't Tell want to make. They want to discredit the capabilities of our allies, our NATO allies, and foreign militaries who serve alongside us in Iraq and Afghanistan. I've worked with many officers enlisted from these various services of nations that have repealed their bans, and they are very professional, very competent, capable allies who work side by side with their American counterparts, and I have seen zero detriment to their mission or to our mission.
Let me ask you about something else that General Sheehan talked about today. He told an anecdote from Vietnam. It was about a sexual assault that he says took place in a foxhole during the Vietnam War. He also cited a study showing that sexual assaults in combat zones are on the rise, and he concluded by saying that repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell would mean essentially more rape in the military. What was your response to that anecdote?
Once again, I was a little puzzled by the General's comments. I'm not sure where he got his data from, but there again, it seems completely out of date. For him to bring up a story from Vietnam and use that as relative to today's argument, I just find that a little dated, quite frankly. Don't Ask, Don't Tell, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, if anything, would enhance the reporting of assault cases. It would allow for more open venue for these situations to be reported. Beyond that, the vast majority of assault cases are male on female. So it kind of befuddles the logic there. I don't know where he gets his information from.
Major Almy, I have to ask, and if you're not comfortable telling me, just say, but you were discharged 3.5 years ago. You only spoke
Correct.
about it publicly on television for the first time with me here last month. What's the last month been like since you've become so public and making the decision to speak out at the hearing today, for example? How have things changed for you?
Personally, I'm glad that I decided to tell my story. I've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of emails thanking me for doing this, for telling my story. More importantly, I've gotten a lot of feedback for giving a voice to those who have none in this argument. There's an estimated currently 66,000 LGBT Americans serving in our military today who have absolutely no voice in this argument, in this public debate that's going on across